One guy made $5 billion. Do you think that one guy created $5 billion himself of value to that company? There's no chance. No human being can create $5 billion in 365 days through their labor.
Senator Bernie Sanders, who is out with a new book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. Good morning, Senator. Good to have you here.
Fuck yeah, it is.
We have a lot to get through, but I want to talk about one of the things you flesh out in the book. You talk about the alliance you formed with Joe Biden during the campaign to really shape the Democratic platform and incorporate many of your ideas. You said he wasn't as bold as you would have hoped, but he would have been the most progressive president since FDR if he had acted on that.
Now, like, you know, we don't need to, I don't think I need to tell anybody that Bernie putting all of that stuff forward and fighting for any of that and us not really getting most of it, it's okay. Now, it's not okay in the sense of like, oh, hey, it would have been nice if we would have gotten all of those really nice, really cool things. Absolutely. But I want everyone to keep in mind, the reason why you want Bernie Sanders in the room setting, basically setting the precedent for Biden's presidency and for his term is because you want the, how do I put this? You want Bernie Sanders to be able to set the terms as to what a progressive president looks like. You know, because Bernie, now that we've gone through, you know, now that he played ball, he set the agenda, or at the very least, he set the boundaries of the agenda. And Joe Biden did not even touch those boundaries, didn't even come close to being the most progressive president since FDR. Bernie now gets to go out there and say, yep, my vision of President Joe Biden's term would look very different and much more appealing, theoretically, to the average American. There were a lot of people who gave him a lot of shit for even working with Joe Biden, but after a point, you kind of have to understand that there's not really a lot more change you can affect without being involved and being able to, even if we don't get all of those things, we didn't get a $15 minimum wage, we didn't get a lot of things that we should have gotten. But it's better to have Biden on the record saying he was going to do those things, because when the people come around to vote again, they do not have the cover of arguing that Joe Biden would have done this, he would have done that, except X or Y or whatever excuse they want to make. You can always pull them back and hold him to the standard that he set himself and that he agreed to with Bernie Sanders.
That agenda. How do you categorize Joe Biden on that progressive scale now?
Well, I think the American Rescue Plan that we passed early in his agenda, in the midst of the terrible pandemic, the economic collapse, was in fact one of the most significant pieces of legislation for the working class of this country in the modern history of America. Build Back Better.
Build Back Better. That needs to be Bernie's new slogan.
Would have been transformational. It would have finally addressed the crises that the working class of this country has faced for decades, revolutionized childcare, revolutionized healthcare, dealt boldly with climate change, raised wages. I mean, it would have done a whole lot.
But the votes weren't there.
We got 0 Republican support, and 2 Democrats decided not to support it.
Well,
So in terms of how you view the president, do you think he is progressive?
I think.
so keep in mind, do you think she would have asked this question in 2016, in 2012? Do you think the framing on this would be as favorable towards Bernie Sanders being the arbiter of who is and who isn't progressive? This was good strategy on his part. Yes, we didn't get the things we wanted to get, and yes, let's be clear, we were never going to get them under Joe Biden. You should have supported him anyway, because at the end of the day, your other option was Trump, and I don't think you want Trump for another 4 years. The same way we're not going to want him in another 4 years, come 24. But if you're asking me who I want deciding who is or what is progressive or not, it's Bernie Sanders.
He is a much more progressive president than he was a United States senator.
Not
And
wrong.
I think as a result of the campaign and the task forces we did together, you recall we had task forces during his campaign and my campaign. I think we came up with an agenda that was progressive. Obviously, we were not able to get everything we wanted to get done.
In some of the things you were able to get done and signed into law, President Biden points to them as achievements, but you diminish them a little bit in this book. You point out Medicare won't be permitted to negotiate lower drug prices until 2026.
Fucking
the cap
ridiculous.
on out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for seniors doesn't kick in until 2025.
Fucking
$35
Christ.
cap on insulin prices doesn't help those who aren't on Medicare.
So these are the things that, like, all the stuff that they passed. Do you notice how, like, do you ever notice how, like, whenever there's anything that's, like, you know, going to help, you know, corporations, you know, whether it's quantitative easing, whether it's bailing out the banks, whatever it is, do you ever notice how when it's any of these kind of corporate sponsored or like business centered bills or relief or legislation or whatever, that shit goes through quickly. It goes through, it goes into effect, it's in, it's bing, it's boom, it's done, right? But do you notice how, like, whenever they're like, oh, what if we, like, you know, help out seniors, pay for their drugs? Why don't we allow you know, Medicare to negotiate for only certain, keep in mind, only certain drugs, all the rest of this stuff. Do you notice that none of this shit actually starts to happen for, like, what, 3 to 4 fucking years? Like, just keep that in mind. It's just something to know. Like, it shows you the priorities, that when it's like, when it's for the American people, when it's for average people, or even like Medicare recipients, they're like, look, we'd love to do this thing that would help you and be good for you, but we need 3 to 4 years to let drug companies and everybody else acclimate to that process. It's why, like, healthcare shouldn't really be tied to, like, should not be commodified the way that it is now.
Are you saying he hasn't delivered?
No. I mean, look, this is the real world that we live in, is that you need 60 votes often in the Senate, and Democrats had a slim majority in the House. But what I am talking about, Mark, and what the book is about, is taking a hard look at the reality facing working families in this country. And the truth is that today, over 60% of our people are living paycheck.
Also, by the way, do you think Bernie Sanders could get away with a book that's active, like, named "You're Allowed to Be Mad at Capitalism" in 2016? Like, do you think he'd get away with that and get any audience? No, he wouldn't. Bernie Sanders is probably one of the best strategic like leftists we have had in our nation's history, honest to God. From a legislative point of view and from, like, a strategy as a politician, Bernie Sanders is almost second to none, especially in the modern era. Like 6 years ago, you would not catch him on they would not even let him onto you know, any of the major news broadcasters with a book out that is critical by name explicitly of capitalism.
Check the paycheck. So the question that I'm asking is, why in the richest country in the history of the world, why don't we have a healthcare system that works for all, where people can walk into the doctor's office, as they do in Canada, without having to take out their wallet? Why do we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare? Why do we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? So we have seen some achievements, but given the scope of the problems and where we should be going, nowhere near enough.
We also have one of the most innovative healthcare systems when it comes to creation of pharmaceutical drugs. You are doing this.
No.
So when someone hears you lay out the problems with our pharmaceutical industry, as you do in this book, it's say, but the life-saving vaccines, for example, for COVID, they were created by the United States of America. They were created by the pharmaceutical system with taxpayer help.
Sure.
True. By the United States, not by private industry.
Of course the drug companies produce great drugs, but 1 out of 4 people in America cannot afford the drugs that their doctors prescribe. You tell me why we pay 10 times more for some drugs that are sold in the United States compared, say, to Canada or to other countries, while year after year the pharmaceutical industry makes tens of billions of dollars in profits, pays their CEOs exorbitant salaries. So of course we want the drug companies to do the research and development. And by the way, taxpayers in this country spend $45 billion a year through the NIH to help with that research and development, including Moderna and the vaccine.
You're talking about Moderna. Pfizer didn't take that money, but Moderna, you're sharply critical. In fact, you're chair of the Senate's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And next month, you're
also keep in mind with any business. Okay, so like with almost any business, the thing that you're going to be, so the way you're going to make profit, right, and the way that you kind of organize how you're going to generate that profit is usually around two things. You're either going to sell your products at a higher price and sell less of them, meaning like, you know, where you're going to spend less money on production, you're going to spend less money on distribution, but you're going to make that up by having the price basically outpace those things and outweigh those things. It's, you know, if you're making a good one for is like if you're making like shoes, for example, if you're making like a limited edition, I don't know, fucking some limited edition like Air Jordan, right? The idea is not like, oh, we want to mass produce like thousands upon millions of these things and sell them at quantity. You sell them more based on their what's the word I'm looking for? Their what's the word? You sell them based on their value on scarcity, meaning like, you know, there's only 100 of these in the world or something, meaning even though, you know, you only made 100, you only produced 100, meaning that, you know, you're not your return on that investment is going to be a lot higher. So like, you know, there are basically two ways. That's kind of how most companies it's either you go for quantity. You either go for like selling like you know, this one product the margin might be thin for like you're producing it and then selling it, and that margin could be thin, or alternatively, or you sell it at a loss. But if you're selling so many you know, if you're selling so many copies, or if you're selling so many of that product, it can offset those costs after a certain point. It's just kind of different ways. When we're talking about drug companies, I don't really see an argument for anything other than mass production and mass distribution, instead of what we have, which are a lot of drug companies who create these, you know, create the drugs, create all of these vaccines, everything else, and want a much wider margin on their return on investment. I don't really think that is a workable or like a moral, certainly not a moral foundation for how to build that kind of business. But also, I don't really think that it like meets the needs of the market. The market people need drugs. There is no use for a drug that you can't afford. That drug by its existence and being over expensive is useless. A drug that somebody can't pay for to take might as well not exist. So if we're talking about like drug makers, they should be going based on quantity, based on I forget what there's like a term for it, but yeah, they should be selling at quantity, not what they do now, which is create, you know, bougie ass, you know, like, you know, the, you know, marked up name brand shit.
Calling in Moderna's CEO to testify. You're critical of his plan to quadruple the cost of the COVID vaccine. Can you stop him from doing that?
Well, here's the story. Taxpayers, the NIH co-authored, worked together to create the vaccine.
Right.
Taxpayers put billions of dollars into the development of the vaccine, guaranteed sales for the vaccine.
As they did with many other companies,
Yep. All right. And then what happens after the government stockpile of the vaccine expires? These guys say, well, we're going to quadruple the price of the vaccine. And by the way, in the last 2 years, the CEO made $5 billion, and his other guys made billions of dollars. Is that really what should be happening? Truth is.
Also, keep in mind, one guy made $5 billion. Do you think that one guy created $5 billion himself of value to that company? There's no chance. No human being can create $5 billion in 365 days through their labor. It's impossible. You couldn't do it.
The pharmaceutical industry is enormously greedy, charging us outrageously, uncontrollably high prices. We've got to deal with that. As chairman of the relevant committee, I intend to do what I can.
Moderna says it's instituting a patient assistance plan to give the COVID shot to the uninsured and underinsured Americans free of cost. Is that sufficient?
And you know, Margaret,
for you?
amazing coincidence. That happened the same exact day as we announced that we were inviting them to testify.
You think your political heat made that difference?
Well, maybe it was just a wild and crazy coincidence. I don't know. But we also want to take a look at what patient program is about. We're talking to them about that. But obviously, it's a step in the right direction.
Step in the right direction. How do you...
So also keep in mind, I want to also harp on this. You know, I know I'm stopping a lot, but I want to harp on this. They chose to do that. This is the difference between the private market, and it's why, like, whenever people like talk up the private market, you know, and like, you know, the quality of work. I remember we watched another video, and it's like, you know, it was, you know, last episode we watched that video with teenagers, and the one kid mentioned like, oh, well, the private market is, you know, the private market will always outperform the public market. In which case, he's mostly right. But here's the difference: the private market has no incentive to do anything that puts its customers in front of itself. It's the same way, like, you know, if you buy video games, it are like, you know, the games that we get these days that need day one patches and usually come with the, you know, usually to unlock or like, you know, to get access to all of the content that like any game a developer makes is through a battle pass that you then have to drop an extra $10, maybe $20 on, or like, you know, skins for like characters and stuff like that. All of that used to be baked into video games. All of that used to be part of your $60 purchase. But now it's like your $60 purchase gets you the game, the base game, some, you know, gets you through the base game. But now if you want any of that continued stuff, any of the things that they already made that would have been on the disc, that would have, you know, been in the game normally, you know, like, you know, go back and play like Uncharted 1. There are cheats, there are unlockables to like change skins, to change like the way you play that sort of game. There's a lot of stuff like that. But instead, they decided that your $60 doesn't buy you all that stuff now, which I don't even necessarily think it does. You know, if we were paying $70 for video games, but got all of the game, I wouldn't really have a problem with that. But what are we doing? We're paying $70 and then a battle pass that's $10. Every 4 months there's a new one. So you're squeezing another, you know, what is that? Another, what, $120 out of one game to unlock stuff that is mostly cosmetic that would have been in the game beforehand. At the end of the day, it's not because they want to make the experience better. It's because they're trying to extract more money out of your like first initial purchase.
You lower the cost of prescription drugs in a way that doesn't hurt American innovation. And how do you do it politically when Republicans control the House?
You know, I saw a poll that was done just for Republicans. And you know what Republicans regarded as the major priority they were concerned with? High cost of prescription drugs. All right. So
I've heard this from my Republican family members, actually.
Bipartisan work.
He's not wrong
to tell the
at all.
pharmaceutical industry that they really have got to stop ripping off the American people. A number of ways you could do it. The Inflation Reduction Act started by having Medicare negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry. Doesn't kick in for a few years. Yep. I think we should expedite that. Number two,
it's fucking stupid.
My good friend Donald
Trump. Not only that, but from a political standpoint, it's not going to kick in until either Biden's second term or any Democrats. You know, if Biden doesn't run, so understand, like, from a political standpoint, it's also fucking like idiotic to have this stuff start up within the next administration. Because realize that, like, people are going to like when those things come around, right? But because they got passed so long ago, they're going to pass during, there are three options basically of how, you know, how the you know, Medicare negotiating drug prices is going to pass, right? There are three types of administrations that it'll be during. Biden's second admin, some other Democrats, you know, first presidential administration, or, and this is the big one, because both of those are like, you know, maybe Biden or somebody else, but it'll be one of those two, or Ron DeSantis or Trump. So imagine we're sitting in 2026. Medicare starts negotiating drug prices, as was dictated by the Inflation Reduction Act, signed and passed by Democrats and Joe Biden, but will go into effect to actually help Americans during a Trump or DeSantis administration. Meaning, while the president could be one of those two guys, you're going to have Medicare recipients go, huh, would you look at that? My drug prices have suddenly been reduced by a shockingly large amount. Thank you, Mr. President. Do you think they're going to go through, or somebody's going to explain to them, hey, Joe Biden, hey, Democrats, we actually did that. No, they're going to go, no, this passed. Joe Biden is not president. Donald Trump is. Donald Trump gets credit for this. It's actively fucking stupid. And Democrats do this all the time. They pass popular legislation and then set it up to actually be enacted, to start taking effect during another party's administration. And then that administration gets the credit. It's fucking stupid.
All right, who I disagree with on everything, had the idea that maybe Medicare should not pay prices higher than the average of what countries around the rest of the world are paying. That's
God, can you imagine?
We want to pursue that as well. And there's the concept of reimportation, that if Americans can buy drugs in Canada or in Europe at a fraction of the price, let's have pharmacists and distributors be able to purchase those drugs and sell them at much lower cost in the United States.
This involves state subsidies of some form, government subsidies.
No, that does not involve subsidies. Okay. That simply says if you can buy a drug in Canada, same drug for 1/10 of the price, passes FDA specifications, it should be sold in this country at a lower price.
And you think you can do this with Republicans in control of the House? Do you think the votes are there?
I think there's a lot of support for dealing with the high cost of prescription.
Republicans in the House won't do it, but they should.
In that makeup of Congress right now, Democrats have this narrow 51-seat
majority
in the Senate.
Unfortunately, Republican voters are, and I do mean this, fucking stupid, because literally their legislators will say, no, that's socialism, we don't like socialism, and they will go, oh yeah, that's right, we don't. Okay, never mind, don't give me lower drug prices. But they'll just lie to them or tell them that it's the thing that they're told they should be afraid of their entire lives, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, we don't support that. Then they'll support the actual policy. But if it's Bernie Sanders or a Democrat or whatever, they'll just label it as socialist, as communist, as whatever, and boom, there we go. And Republican voters will just be like, nope, guess I don't want lower drug prices.
You're an independent, but you caucus with the Democrats. Both of Pennsylvania's senators are out of office right now dealing with serious health issues. And so their absence complicates any votes. Do you have any idea when, for example, Senator Fetterman will be out of the hospital and well enough to return?
We wish Senator Fetterman has gone through a hell of a year. I mean, with his stroke in the middle of a campaign and dealing with other issues. So I can't answer that. I think Bob Casey, who is dealing with prostate cancer, will be back, as I understand it, in early March.
This is a big what if. I mean, this is a very key state, Pennsylvania.
Sure.
United States of America, what if?
Are you concerned?
Well, obviously, we're concerned about the health of all of our members, and we hope that they are all back. Bob, I think, will be back. We know that. John, I just don't have that information.
Mm-hmm. Because Pennsylvania, in so many ways, also isn't a...
Keep in mind, senators and Congress people have, basically European-style healthcare. They have essentially the system that Bernie Sanders wants for the country is the system that he has now. It's why he has such a clear view of how much better the system is for them, because they have excellent healthcare.
Example of a lot of what you talk about in terms of the
why do you think you never hear about them getting sick or any of the rest of the stuff?
Are you concerned that
nearly as often as most people?
There has to be a special election, for example, or if Casey doesn't run, then it goes to the Republicans.
Bob will be back in a few weeks. Okay. So let's not speculate on it. But like Pennsylvania, like Vermont, like other countries, like other states in our country, the people in those states are hurting. And the question of the book again is that how come we have so many people who are struggling? We have a dysfunctional healthcare system. Our childcare system is in disarray. We got millions of elderly people who have nothing in the bank as they face retirement, and yet the people on top are doing phenomenally well. And Margaret, what the book is about is saying that we have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had. We have more concentration of ownership in sector after sector than we have ever had. We have a political system which is increasingly corrupt, because as a result of Citizens United, billionaires can put enormous amounts of money into it to elect their candidates. And we have, 8 major media conglomerates, corporate media conglomerates, that control about about what 90% of the American people see, hear, and read. Those are really issues that we need to discuss. That's what the book does.
Do you worry when you talk about the corporate media that you are targeting journalists when you say that?
No. Donald Trump talks about fake news, and that's simply to deflect attention from the fact that he's a pathological liar. My experience one-on-one with media, they work hard. They very rarely mind misquoted. But what I am talking about, Margaret, is that corporate media limits the kind of debate that we have in this country. You tell me, you know more about it than I do. How often do we talk about income and wealth inequality?
We're talking about right now, Senator.
Yeah, but how often? Not everybody is Bernie Sanders on your show. How often do you talk about concentration of ownership? How often do you talk about the fact that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee?
My man just said concentration of ownership, bruh.
That if somebody has a baby in Finland, they get 9 months off or 10 months off paid family leave.
I will talk to you about paid leave for families any day of the week. They also have like a 56% tax rate in Finland, though. It's a very different system. But
good, but let's talk about it. What do they get for that? They get free healthcare, right? Free higher education. That's the kind. That's exactly what I'm talking.
Really, we're doing the. But don't they like pay a lot of taxes? Like, yes. So this is always the thing that you're gonna hear with, especially with like corporate media, is they always do like this like dig of like, but like, don't they pay a lot in taxes? Yeah, they do. But here's the difference. Americans pay a what? Pretty most Americans pay a rather low amount of taxes, right? Like I think most Americans are probably paying anywhere between 12 and like 24-ish% on their taxes, right? For their like federal income tax, right? Like that, like, and what are they getting for that? Almost a quarter of what they're making is going to taxes. Now, obviously, you're going to get some of that back regardless. But let's think about this. What are they getting for it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're still in debt because they can't afford healthcare. They're still in what's the word? They're still their roads are shitty. Their military is overfunded. Like, you're not getting anything as an American for paying even $1 of your taxes. $1 of your taxes isn't going to do anything that is actually happening like for you. But, and here's the key part. If you are living in Europe, any of these other, like she mentioned Sweden, I think is what they name dropped, or the Netherlands or whatever. For your, whatever percentage that they're paying, and also, by the way, I think she mentioned an 84%, that is top marginal, which means most people are not paying that. That is for the highest earners in that country. But even so, like, you're getting constantly revamped infrastructure, you're getting your healthcare costs completely neutralized. Like, what you're getting, the conversation isn't about how much you're paying in the taxes. The conversation is, what are you getting for how much you're paying into taxes? If I put $5 into taxes and get fucking nothing, right? Then, like, yeah, fuck paying taxes. Then this isn't worth it. If I put $5 into taxes and $1 goes to my retirement, $3 goes to the military, and $1 goes into, and 50 cents goes into fixing my roads, and the other 50 cents goes to like 25 other things, right? You'd be like, oh yeah, this is like, I'm not getting fucking anything out of this. I'm not getting any fucking thing out of this, right? But if you're taking, if it's $5 and you're like, okay, $2, maybe even $1 of that is going to the military, $3 are going to cover every single time you go to a hospital, every single time you talk to a doctor, every single time I gotta go get these renewed. I go in, I get my prescription, I'm out. I go in, I get, they do the stethoscope shit, I'm out. I go to a hospital, I'm in, I'm out. Instead of with the system we have now, where guess what? You're still paying that $5, but get sick and guess what? It's going to cost you a lot more than $5. So it's just like, it's just like, what are we getting for our taxes? And we don't get anything. And it's like, yeah, like, and Bernie Sanders is being honest when he's like, I want you to get more out of your taxes, but that also means you're going to have to pay a little bit more into those taxes. But I think the offset of that is, and he makes this point all the time, the offset is you're not going to be worried about going to the hospital, getting picked up by an ambulance, and now you're in thousands of dollars of debt. Say goodbye to all of your savings. Say goodbye to all of your retirement. Like, I've seen I've gotten like a crazy hospital bill. Like, it was, I went in, I came out, they gave me like one numbing thing. They couldn't find anything wrong with me or whatever. And it cost me $5,000 to be there for 2 hours and spend most of my time in a crowded waiting room. And it cost me $5,000. They wanted $5,000 for that, for resources that most likely hardly cost them anywhere near that. And it's why most Americans don't go to hospitals, why they don't go to doctors, because they can't afford to be sick. So anyway, I need to move on, but it's rather obvious.
Talking about.
Yeah.
That's the debate I want, and that's the debate we really don't have on the corporate media.
So President Biden talks about finishing the job and the potential for running for re-election in 2024. You said you won't run if he runs. Do you believe that President Biden will face any primary challenge from the left, from the progressive wing?
I can't speak for other people. I think there's a general consensus right now that President Biden has done not everything we would like. He has done a good job. And again, I can't speak for anybody else. But what I have said is if he runs, now says that he's going to run, I will support him.
Do you see anyone who would challenge him?
Can't speculate.
As you write in your book, that the essence of you're very harsh on Democrats, but you say the essence of the
Worse on Republicans, though.
You write the essence of the Democratic message in recent years has been, we're pretty bad, but Republicans are worse, so vote for us. Is there anyone inspirational in Democratic politics?
Sure, there's some great people who are working night and day to protect working class people. But the thesis of that particular chapter is that working class people are responding to the Republicans, not because they want to cut Social Security and Medicare and give tax breaks to the rich. It's they have heard Democrats say for years that they are the party of the working class. And then people are saying, really, I can't afford health care. I can't afford prescription drugs. I can't afford to send my kid to college.
So who's the next Bernie Sanders? Who is that voice?
I'll let you discover that. I don't. What I will tell you, and we talk about this in the book, what I am extremely proud of is that there are more really strong, young progressives, often people of color, in the House now than probably in any time, certainly in my lifetime. Great people. And that is, if you ask me what I'm most proud of, is that so many young people, we won the young vote overwhelmingly. And I think young people are saying, we don't want to tinker around the edges anymore, not on climate change, not on racial issues, not on economic issues. We want transformational change. And if my campaign's played a role in changing that consciousness, I'm very proud of that.
You are up for re-election to the Senate in 2024.
Yeah.
Can you take the wins that you have had in shaping the Democratic platform as you have, with the issues that you have raised, and walk away with that win, or do you feel you need to run again?
I think, look, in my chapter on the media, what I talk about is media is very interested in elections and elections. I was
know you don't
elected.
like these questions.
I was elected to do a job, and I'm working really hard as chairman of this committee. People back home are not asking me whether I'm going to run. They say, Bernie, we can't afford health care, can't afford prescription drugs. Do something. Let me focus on that.
So you don't feel like you have a ticking clock here for 2024?
At the right time.
Has to get all this done.
Between me and the people of Vermont, and we have plenty of time.
Former Ambassador Nikki Haley is running for president, as you know, and she said there should be a mandatory mental competency test for politicians older than 75. You're 81. Do you take offense at that?
What does she mean? I don't understand what she. I think that's absurd. There's a level.
Absurd.
Yeah, we are fighting racism, we're fighting sexism, we're fighting homophobia. I think we should also be fighting ageism. Trust people, look at people, and say, this person's competent, this person's not competent. There are a lot of 40-year-olds out there who ain't particularly competent. Older people, you look at the individual. I don't think you make a blanket statement.
Okay. So when it comes to the current president or the former president and their age range, it doesn't concern you?
Look at what they do, what they believe in. What are they fighting for? What does Donald Trump stand for? Do you believe in that? Well, I certainly don't. What does Joe Biden stand for? What is he doing? Has he accomplished? Look at him in that way, not on age.
You say in the book that
when it comes down to it, also, like, we talk about age isn't really like, when we talk about age in politics, I think like what a lot of people like misidentify is it's not really so much about like a person's age or like, the actual, how long they've been on the earth. The question that needs to be asked a lot of time is what era and what time did they come into joining politics? If you are somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who has had her position for, since I believe like the fucking 80s, like she's been, let's take a look really quick. Like Nancy Pelosi has been, what the fuck? Oh. Okay. How long has she been in her? 1987. She's been in the House since 87. So let's keep in mind, Nancy Pelosi comes into politics in the late 80s, surrounded by Reagan-style politics and Reagan style Republicans, followed by, the first Bush administration, along with then kind of lives through the Clinton era and kind of the rise of the like modern contemporary like neoliberal order here. So like Nancy Pelosi's politics are like older than me, right? Her politics are that of the weak tinkering around the edges, Democrat who, wants to do all these good things, but don't want to raise the taxes too much. And, the Cold War just ended. So there's still a lot of that Cold War scare around socialism and communism. So like, it's why she comes out and says stuff like, oh, well, we're capitalists. And it's why she comes out there and like, will actively like make half measure and half measure after half measure, go out there with fucking like kente cloth to stand up or whatever, or be an ally to black folks, instead of doing the thing you're supposed to do, which is pass fucking legislation to change things and improve lives. Nancy Pelosi's politics is all about that like adjacency to change without any of it. And it's and like that style of politics was, in vogue for the Democrats back then. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, although his politics certainly come from a even older era, a more revolutionary era, Bernie Sanders is bringing ideas and bringing a mode of politics that just doesn't. It's not contemporary. It's not even old in the sense of like, it's not old ideas. We haven't had this style of politics for a very long time. So like, age isn't, they're both old geezers, sure. But Bernie Sanders' politics are so much more new to the body politic, new to the discussion, new to the discourse, as opposed to, Nancy Pelosi's style of politics.
Democrats are wrong to suggest that former President Trump supporters are racists, sexists, and homophobes, that they're deplorable. You point out these so-called racists, many of them voted for Barack Obama, but their lives didn't improve. Do you think that the Democratic Party messaging is just entirely wrong-headed to frame this as a broader moral issue?
Look, are there supporters of Trump who are racist, sexist, homophobes? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Like, to paint a broad brush and say, well, that's the reason that they don't vote for the Democrats, that is really wrong. Look, I've been all over this country. I have worked with trade unionists, people on strike, people who had the courage to stand up for economic injustice. Great people. And I talk to the union leaders, 70% of our people are Republican. Why is that? Because I think they have lost faith that the Democratic Party is going to stand up and fight for them. And they say, oh, Democrats talk, they don't accomplish. Oh, I'm going to vote for Trump. Maybe
but you blame Democrats going back to Bill Clinton for signing on to NAFTA. You blame Barack Obama.
That's right.
You're critical of Joe Biden as well here.
That's right.
Absolutely.
In other words, what I have said over and over again, working class people, in my view, are not responding primarily, there are other reasons, to the Republican message because they want to cut Social Security and Medicare and give tax breaks to billionaires. That's not what working class people are voting for. If the Democrats
mostly culture war
had an agenda that says, we know.
There's a reason why the Republican Party is focused so heavily on culture war. And it's simply that they don't have an economic message. They don't have an economic vision. Their economic vision is to return to the 1950s, except the problem is that they run up against reality, in this case being that the 1950s were not just a time where everything was great and everything was wonderful. It was a time when taxes were incredibly high. They want to it's why they at the end of the day, it's why like they don't actually try to like live up to any of that. They don't actually try on that whole when it comes to what am I thinking? To the 1950s. They don't try to create that kind of society. They don't try to create that kind of productive like environment in the United States. No. What they want is to, when they say the 1950s, when they hearken back to a lot of these older economic formats, these older economic times, what they want to do is conjure up nostalgia and the idea of like, oh, things were better back then when somebody's left with the 1950s And they're like, oh, we want to go back to that time where we were making things and when the American economy was like booming and growing and da-da-da and kids and blah, 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 everything, all of those things, right? In any American's mind, they think, they're thinking usually 2 or 3 aspects of their childhood or their upbringing or maybe their grandparents or their parents' childhoods that like reminds them of the good old times. To them, they're like, oh man, I remember the 1950s were a great time when, and when they think of the 3 things up in their mind bubble, they're thinking of 3 things. Those can be anything. And it is the Republican Party as an institution which has done the work to fill in those blanks for people and to obfuscate the actual reasons why our economy was the way it was. People think like, oh man, I remember when like dad was the only one who had to have a, we only needed one income and mom could stay home and take care of the kids, right? And people think like, oh, that was like the best time, the ideal, right? And what do Republicans do? They don't argue for a higher minimum wage, even though back then minimum wage had just been created back in the I believe the late 30s, early 40s, meaning that we had just finally established a benchmark for how Americans were able, a benchmark for Americans getting paid, and a benchmark meaning we could guarantee a certain living standard for everybody. But they don't mention that, right? That's not the thing that they choose to focus on. They go, you're right, things were better when mom was at home. That's the thing that was important. That's the part of it. That's the key, was that the mother was at home. Even though the actual thing that is good about that society is that there was one income. The one income part of that is what you should be focused on. But what do? They obfuscate. They decide like, no. It's about the women in the women not being in the workplace. That's when things were better. When women being in the workplace had nothing to do with it. You know what was better? Only needing one income to sustain a household. That's when it was better. When you could buy a house on one income, on one middle class income, you could buy a good home. Even in the lower class, you could buy decent homes at that time on the wages that we had. But is that the thing that they mention? No. The thing that they always bring up is mom stayed at home. She didn't go and work. She didn't have, and with that comes the women can't have credit cards that aren't without her husband's name on them. Women aren't really part of society the same way that they are now. They're not in the workforce. They're not making their own money. So when there are problems with marriage, when you have abusive husbands, or you just have marriages that aren't healthy, that aren't working, guess what? Women go fuck themselves. They're stuck. They're economically isolated from the rest of the world because they're reliant on their husband, on their spouse, or whatever. And notice how like things only got worse for women back then. It's only a step back for women. Less independent, less of an ability to strike out on their own, less of an ability to find proper work. So keep that in mind. Like, Republicans at the end of the day, like, want to identify a better time, but characterize it with its worst characteristics.
That your kid can't afford to go to college. And that's why we're going to make higher education or public colleges and universities tuition free. We know you can't afford childcare, outrageously expensive. We're going to work on that. We know we're the only country in the world not to guarantee health care is right. You pass a Medicare for all single payer program. You expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and eyeglasses. Democrats ain't going to lose an election for a long, long time.
But
so, Mike Mushroom, so we should fix the wage gap then, right? Because when there's like a discrepancy, when there's an issue, then we should fix that, right? Or is the problem that they're just that is the problem that there's a wage gap, or is there a problem that somebody's pointing out that there's a wage gap? Like,
which Democrat would take that vote? I mean, you have said Medicare for all, you can't pass in the current Congress.
Yeah, but is it a popular issue? I have to take on the whole bloody insurance industry, the drug industry, and yet we still have tens of millions of people who understand that Medicare for all is right. If we had a united Democratic Party saying, yeah, we have the guts to take on the powerful special interest they could win that fight and be in.
I'm going to
look,
assume
FDR
you're
did it
talking
in the
about
30s.
Ukraine.
He won 4 elections because he had the guts to stand
But
up.
perk
to
up if
special
I'm
interests
wrong.
and say, you know what, I'm on the side of the working class.
You look at the map of this country, though, and Democrats have lost that, other than the coast, there are huge swaths in rural America.
Yes.
What is it about rural America that the Democrats do not understand?
These are white working class people
They're
who do
elitist.
not believe that the Democrats are standing up and fighting for them. All right. And what we need to do is have a movement of black workers, Latino workers, white workers, gay workers, straight workers, and understand that we're all in this together. I don't care if you're living in rural Iowa, where I spent a lot of time. All right. You can't afford healthcare. You can't afford to send your kid to college, or you're living in San Francisco. So too often we forget about the economic issues that unite us. The vast majority of the people know the pharmaceutical industry is ripping us off. The vast majority of the people understand that we got to improve our educational system. Let's work on that.
Are you going to campaign for Joe Biden if he runs for president? Because, you just laid out that what he's done is nice, but it's not sufficient to raise.
Bernie Sanders pressured the Moderna, I think it was Moderna, I believe, or it might have been Pfizer, to hand out COVID vaccines for free to the uninsured because he was going to, which I believe they're still doing. They're bringing them in for questioning on in Congress. So, he's not the president, but putting pressure on pharmaceutical companies, I would say that's leadership.
All the issues that you just laid out.
It's a little premature to talk about a campaign that isn't.
We talk about it all the time.
That hasn't been announced.
Well, they do want to
Well, he
charge
says he's
people for
decided
something that
that
was
he decided
previously
to.
free.
Well, after that,
So-
he and I will talk and we'll see what we'll do.
And you want to shape the
But I did
conversation.
look. When he was running, to me, it was extraordinarily important that Trump be defeated.
Yeah.
And to his courage, what Biden did after the election, sat down with our people, campaigns came together. He came up with some pretty progressive ideas.
I want to ask you about some issues on foreign policy. The CIA director, Bill Burns, recently said that the uptick in violence in Israel and Palestine.
Mike Mushroom, you do know that we've already seen that what's the word I'm looking for? Districts that vote heavily Trump and turned away the vaccine had a worse health outcomes compared to those in more Democrat voting districts where they took the vaccine. You do know that, right? Like, you're aware of that.
Territories reminds him of the last intifada, that there could be an explosion of violence. Israel now is the most right-wing government it's had in years. Do you think that democracy is imperiled in Israel right now?
I do. And I am very worried about what Netanyahu is doing and some of his allies in government and what may happen to the Palestinian people. And let me tell you something. I haven't said this publicly, but I think the United States gives billions of dollars in aid to Israel. And I think we've got to put some strings attached to that and say you cannot run a racist
The idea that we don't have
You
strings
cannot turn
attached
your
is
back
actually
on
kind
a
of
two-state
nuts.
Solution. You cannot demean the Palestinian people there. You just can't do it and then come to America and ask for money.
Have you talked to the administration about it? They've been very careful in criticism of the Netanyahu government.
Well, I am not careful about it. I'm embarrassed that in Israel you have a government of that nature right now.
And are you going to introduce something
We may well, yes.
to try to attach strings
Look,
to USA?
you cannot give, if you have whether it's Saudi Arabia or other authoritarian societies, if a government is acting in a racist way and they want billions of dollars from the taxpayers of the United States, I think you say, sorry, that's not acceptable. You want our money? Fine, this is what you got to do to get it.
The pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC.
Okay, so you're just gonna ignore. You're just gonna ignore what I said. Okay, cool. That sounds good. I do know that 30 countries are seeing XXS that aren't COVID deaths. Okay. Okay. Other countries have excess deaths. Cool. Do you have any evidence that that's tied to vaccines?
Used to be bipartisan, but these days it's got a super PAC that has spent very heavily in Democratic primaries.
Against progressives.
You said they're doing everything they can to destroy the progressive movement in this country. Do you think the politics around this issue are constraining the White House going into 2024?
The way I look at AIPAC now in terms of their political activities, this is not even just the pro-Israel group. This is a corporate PAC, sometimes getting money from Republicans, sometimes supporting extreme right-wing Republicans. So what really upset me very much is that in many of these primaries, we had great candidates, young people, often people of color.
Who's they?
And you had AIPAC and other super PACs spending millions of dollars trying to defeat them. And as you may know,
Absolutely.
I tried to get the Democratic Party to pass a resolution that in Democratic primaries, super PAC money should not be allowed to be used.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this is what's constraining the Biden White House right now, the concerns about the politics around this domestically?
Look, bottom line is what constrains any president is we have a corrupt political system in which big money plays an enormous role. And right now, if I run for re-election, people.
So I'm
wanna
not
spend
getting
some
that link
billionaire
now.
wants to
Okay.
spend millions of dollars against me, perfectly legal to do so. That constrains all politics in America.
If you run for re-election to the Senate, so you are considering it.
Sure, I'm considering it, but I haven't made any decision.
You are,
Dude,
when you
I
talk
hope
about
he
American
fucking
workers, you're
runs.
proposing a new cabinet-level agency to focus on the future
Granted,
of work.
I will say this. Bernie, I would love Bernie to run, but I'm not gonna say that, like, he's like, this will be the third time. And again, if he runs, I'll vote for him. I don't give a shit. I'll vote for Bernie every fucking time. But I do feel like we need somebody younger to step up and kind of take that mantle. What he should do is kind of tap somebody to run and then like immediately come out and like declare his like VP status or something.
Workers, you talk about taxing robots who might replace humans. Isn't the Labor Department supposed to be doing these things?
Well, theoretically, but I don't think we're doing enough. Look, this is a huge issue. There is a revolution taking place now with artificial intelligence and robotics. Okay, millions of workers are going to lose their jobs. Who's making those decisions, Maura? You hear it debated in Congress? I don't. All right. So guys who sit at the head, often guys, of large multinational corporations are saying, look, we can do this. We can get rid of all these people over here. We can make even more money. So we're talking about a transformational moment throughout the world in the United States. I want working people to be involved. And if we come up with a technology, I'm not anti-technology. If there is a technology that can do increased worker productivity, who benefits from that? Just the guy who owns the company, or does the worker benefit? So if we can reduce the work week, is that a bad thing? It's a good thing. But I don't want to see the people on top simply be the only beneficiaries of this revolution in technology.
So you agree with Bill Gates in taxing robots?
That's one way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
He's a billionaire you do like.
I've talked to Bill on a number of occasions, yes.
I'm interested in that concept and some of the other things you lay out here, including...
It's not just taxing the robots. It's this whole question of an economic transformation. Are working class people going to benefit from that? Or just...
In what way? I'm curious what you thought. You think Bernie's not fighting for you? Like, I'm curious how you calculated that.
That's the billionaire class.
You also talk about a new deal for journalism and rethinking of the role of public and community media in the United States. You're very harsh on the media, as we talked about, including, you mentioned this network, you mentioned Washington Post, you do.
Didn't I say all kinds of nice things about you?
No, some other journalists here. You did give a shout out to Kara Corte and some other reporters, but you say, you take direct aim at the media for not asking the questions that you think need to be asked. How do you, on this New Deal idea, how can you have the U.S. government in any way involved with the media and direct funding when trust in the government is so low in this country and trust in media is low?
Okay, two separate issues. Number one, what I say in the book is that, look, I have done 1,000 interviews like I'm doing with you right now. And nobody has ever come up to me, not one reporter, not you, not anybody else, that said, Bernie, why are we spending twice as much on healthcare as any other country, and yet we have 85 million uninsured or uninsured? How many programs have CBS, NBC, ABC had on why we have a dysfunctional healthcare system? Does that have anything to do with who owns the major networks? Bernie, what are you going to do about income and wealth inequality? Do you demand, why are billionaires paying an effective tax rate lower than working class people? No one asks me those questions. Okay.
No one tells us the questions to ask.
I understand that, but there's a culture in the media. No one tells people who work for me not to vote for Donald Trump. Surely, I will guarantee you they don't. I never tell them to do it. But then there's another issue, and that is a totally different issue. We are seeing media deserts in this country. Local newspapers are going out of business. So people get no news from their city council, their school board.
Real issue.
How do you deal with that? And the reason they're going out of business is private sector companies can't make money anymore because of the radical transformation of media. What happens? Do people not know what's going on in their city? How do you deal with that? Well, in European countries, what they do is they do it through a non-partisan public funding of media. I think that's an idea that we should explore.
So I'm told we're running out of time. But
I'm just getting warmed up, Margaret. Having fun.
But I have to ask you, you're going on tour to promote this book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And you're here talking about it. I understand we're not the bad guys you're describing in the book when it comes to media. But tickets for your tour apparently are selling for $95 on Ticketmaster, which is accused of anti-competitive behavior. You know that. Some of your Democrats are criticizing them. Aren't you benefiting yourself from this system that you're trying to dismantle?
First of all, those decisions are made totally by the publisher and the bookseller. I think there's one case where in one place here in Washington, Politics and Prose, an independent bookstore, charging some tickets. Most of them, I think, are $40, $50, and you get a book as well. So if you want to come, you're going to have to pay $40. I'll throw in the book for free. And we're doing a number of free events, but I don't make a nickel out of these things.
But you're okay doing business with Ticketmaster?
No, not particularly, but that's, again, I have nothing to do with it.
There's no choice in that. That's one of those cases where it's like, like they're the ticket distributing entity, unfortunately. like the Ticketmaster stuff is really really like the idea that they've let Ticketmaster and I think Live Nation, they both merged to a degree. The idea that they've let either of those two grow to the size that they have is utterly insane. Like they should have already split up Ticketmaster, or at least regulated the absolute fuck out of them by now.
That is, if you wrote a book, it'd probably be the same process.
So you have to operate within the system.
I do.
Is
If
what
I
you're.
write a book, a major publisher, et cetera, et cetera.
Senator Sanders, thank you very much.
Goddamn. What a fucking based king. Okay, let me answer the questions that I didn't answer from you really quickly, because I always, let's see, how do you define a, oh yeah, I saw this one. How do you define a woman? Okay, it's pretty simple. It's a human being that identifies as a woman. That's not really that hard. Let's see, what do you think about the Republicans forcing the vote for McCarthy getting speaker so they could get rules changes in committee seats they wanted, but the Democrats laughed at that? What do I think of it? It was fine. I mean, they had the leverage, A, and also A, they had leverage, B, it's a different context. If we're going to talk about force the vote in the Democrat movement in 2020 and compare that to the most recent kind of Republican version of that, then I don't really think they're analogous, just based on the context between the parties. At the end of the day, the I don't know what the fucking like Marjorie Taylor Greene wing of the Republican Party has nothing to lose if they never pass anything, if they don't do anything. Like, well, actually, I guess she was with McCarthy, so we're talking more about the Lauren Boebert wing. The Lauren Boebert wing, it doesn't really matter. Neither wings, neither halves, neither factions of the Republican Party in the House have anything to lose no matter what. The only person who would lose anything is Kevin McCarthy, to which he was going to lose some ego points in terms of letting this go for so long. But if we're talking about like real consequences, there basically weren't any. Whereas the speakership vote for the Democrats back in 2020, progressives, the difference between progressives and, we'll go with moderate to centrist Democrats is both of those groups are trying to get things passed. There are consequences to one or the other, like, not trading and trading horses equally or whatever it might be. So, I mean, they're similar tactics, but I don't think the force the vote stuff was effective at a point until it wasn't, basically. Once force the vote became kind of like a online, very, very online, whipping stick, it became pretty much counterproductive, to put it plainly. Let's see. Okay, don't care. Bernie, how anyone get the news without local? Well, yeah, I mean, local news is like good. You want local news, like different context. No, it's the exact same scenario. It's not. Doesn't matter if they want anything done. It only matters if they. Yeah. So again, like they're not. So it can be the same scenario, but again, you have to calculate in that Republicans do not want to pass anything on Kevin McCarthy's side, and Republicans on Lauren Boebert's side and the Matt Gaetz side also don't want to pass anything. Nothing is lost. Nothing is gained. The only thing that Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz get out of that entire kerfuffle is some brownie points from anti-establishment Republican voters. That's really all they get. But like, nothing new is going to happen. They're still going to investigate Hunter Biden. They're still going to do investigations on House members who participated in Jan 6. Like nothing's going to materially change. It's just, they get points for causing a stir and trying to what's the word? Draw a line or distinguish themselves from regular Republicans. It mostly is internal politics. It's, whereas AOC or like any of the squad members are looking for different reforms. They want different things passed. Them pushing back on Nancy Pelosi and fighting leadership will lose them momentum because they will basically be what's the word? They'll basically be disciplined. So they're not like, I know they might feel and they might look the same, but motivations on all four sides of these two battles basically very different, coming in with very different motivations. But if we have to agree to disagree, then I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. But okay, so I want to take a look at don't play. Okay, cool. I want to take a look at, oh my god, this loads like every time I open it. Good god. Okay. I want to take a look at, I guess, the Tennessee House bill. Was it a House bill? I know it's like the trans bill that's going through Tennessee right now. That's got a lot to do with drag stuff and a whole bunch of other nonsense. Is this full screen? Oh, it is. Okay, cool. It looks like, okay, so it passed. So basically it passed through committee. It's heading to the governor, which I don't know. We'll kind of find out. Let's read it. Let's see. So they got what they wanted by forcing the vote. Too bad AOC and the progressives didn't try that and prove that they actually cared about what they say. So this is precisely what I mean. You didn't, if you're not gonna like reckon with the like calculus of like Republicans don't actually want to do anything, they don't harm their movement, progressives harm their movement when they look bad, when they actively like don't perform well in the House, like I can't help you. Like you're dug in on this point. This point is religious for you. There's no answer I'm going to be able to give you that's going to satisfy you. I like forcing the vote early, having a candidate to run against Nancy Pelosi, having a lot of this stuff in place ready to go. Sure, forcing the vote on picking a new speaker, I think would have been valuable. For a House vote on Medicare for all, I don't think it would have. I don't think it's really a winning strategy to go out there and propose probably your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your like top like legislative goal, your like spearhead, and watch it get utterly pummeled in votes and, put on a show for the American people. Let's also keep in mind, with hindsight, we know January 6th was going to happen around this time. So also it wouldn't have garnered any of that news press that like forced the vote people wanted. So also with the knowledge of hindsight, it also wouldn't have worked. So unfortunately, I can't help you on this one. Like, you're dug in on this. It's fine. That's your choice. I don't really care anymore. We are 3 years past the point where force the vote has been relevant. So I don't know what to tell you. You either move on or you don't. I've chosen to move the fuck on. It came, it went, it's past its points of relevancy. At this point, see, with the if progressives actually, the progressives don't actually in the House don't actually care about the things they say they care about. You see, this is what I mean when I say force the vote has turned now into not a conversation about strategy, not a conversation about like how to challenge the powers within the Democratic Party. Now it's become just a whipping stick that now it's a litmus test, a pass or fail. If you're in favor of this, I support you. If you're not in favor of this, I don't support you. It's just become a way to distinguish between real progressives and progressives. There's no, at this point, this just serves to cause infighting within the left. So I don't care. I genuinely don't care. Again, past its points of relevancy. That's the last thing I'm going to say about it. Okay. Anyway, Tennessee. Oh, you're right. Let me read the rest of these. Name one thing. It's not a winning strategy. Let's see. Yeah, it's not a winning strategy. Your idea is to fight the system with the system's blessings. You're clueless. I'm really trying hard to not I'm really trying hard to not have you distract me with this. But you know what? I'll keep engaging just because it's going to bug me if I don't. Okay. Name one thing progressives have done to get anything passed. Voted? If you're asking me one thing progressives have done to get anything passed, they've voted for bills, for legislation that usually went to the Senate and died. But like, they still voted, so I'm not. Yeah, it's not winning strategy to fight for what you stand for. It's not a winning strategy to fight for. So you do understand that not all fights are worth fighting, right? It's not just about, it's not just about, what's the word, making yourself feel good by doing a strategy that will not work, but it feels good to do, to virtue signal, to signal that like, oh, these are the, no, I don't care. I want winning strategies. I don't give a fuck about like looking good. I don't give a fuck about like, oh, well, this is like in line with the values. Isn't that like, it's fine. It's fine if it's in line with the values, but I want winning strategy. If that means dumbing things down for normies, if that means taking a step back from a fight that you're going to lose and you're going to lose on this one, like, then no, it's not worth fighting if you're going to lose. It's just not. Idea fight a system is systems. Okay, again, they're in Congress. You don't participate in Congress. Like you have, what you have to understand is what you're describing is activism. What you're describing is on the ground outside of the electoral system, organizing and activism. That's not what AOC, that's not what Rashida Tlaib, that's not what any of their jobs are now that they are in Congress. Their job in Congress is to fight within that system. It's going to look different and it's going to involve a lot more, compromise and a lot more compromise is a good enough word. There's going to be a lot more compromise when you are in Congress actively like pushing through legislation than it's going to be if you're on the ground as an organizer. That's just how these things work. They're two different tracks and they're two different ways to achieve the same goal. You want AOC, you want any other progressive to always be in the House because you know for a fact that they are in favor of Medicare for all. You know for a fact that they're in favor of raising taxes on the ownership class. You already know all of these things. All of these more socialist leaning leftist ideals are baked into their politics. Therefore, if you really if you want to knock them down because they didn't do the strategy you want, you do nothing but hurt your own side when it comes to the inside track of actually passing legislation. Do all of this complaining, all of it at the local level, do all of it all you want. It's fine. I don't got a problem with any of that. But once you're doing damage to our own side, it's not worth it. It's now become like a bickering tool between all of us. That's what I mean. That like me and you, I'm not sure if you're a leftist or not, but let's say you are, just because I don't know you from Jack. All right, we are now arguing over a 3-year-old strategy and arguing about should we support the current progressive and leftist representatives in Congress right now for the simple fact that they did not adopt your strategy 3 years ago. Like, is this worth it? Is this worth me and you bickering, going back and forth? Is this building the movement? Is this doing anything? Is this praxis? No, none of it is. We're just arguing. We're just bickering. We're just infighting. I don't like any of this shit. It's not useful. And it's why I don't support Force the Vote as a movement. I'm fine with it as a strategy, especially when I think it's going to work. But in this moment, at this point in 2023, it is only us going to be bickering that we're going to be doing this. It is all this is ever going to create. Let's see. If you fight and lose, at least you fought. No. Okay, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you fight and lose, at least you fought. No, I do not want to fight and lose. I want to fight and win. That is how this goes. You do not want to lose political momentum. Losing battles, even if you're like, oh, like, you know, even if you're like, oh, but, you know, like, at least we performed, at least we, you know, performed our values. I don't give a fuck about any of that shit. I want wins. Force the vote would not have brought us a win and only causes infighting. Therefore, it's useless to me. It's useless. That's it. Yes. I don't think so. This is the thing. I'm so glad you said this. I'm so glad you said in 20 years we might win. Yes, it's not always going to be that quick. If this means I'm waiting 20 years to finally get the fight that we win, that we make the change that we want to see on the left, I'm okay with that. If it takes 20 years, it takes 20 years. But I'm not going to adopt a strategy that takes a year because it sounds nice. It sounds nice when people say like, oh, well, you know, like, if we did like this one thing, if we had like a big general strike, and then we had a Medicare for all vote on the House floor, and we kept note of who voted against it and who voted for it, even though there's zero chance of it passing, meaning the people who voted for it aren't actually at a risk of like voting for something they don't want to, and the people who vote for it and actually mean it, you can't distinguish from those who are faking it. Like, that sounds really nice. All of these fast versions of getting to big systemic change, I don't trust. And you're gonna say that that's like a problem with like me, or that like whatever. It's fine. I don't trust short, fast, and like punchy, and like, oh, like if all of these dominoes just line up in like succession, like super quick, we can get it done like super fast. Do you know how long it's taken to build even Bernie's movement? We've made a lot of progress in like 10 years since 2012 as a good example, but like all of this stuff moves incredibly slow, and all of this stuff moves like very not inherently, very like intently. Every single step has been drawn out, has been decided by groups of people trying to push for different changes. Like, none of this stuff happens overnight, and stuff like Force the Vote, I feel like gives people a false idea that like one or two moves are like, we only need one or two really big shows, really big moves, and we'll be right there for a Medicare for all system. We're not. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take patience. And I don't like this like quick and easy, fast and loose version of like of strategy, the strategy that gets people's hopes up and then obviously will never work, obviously will fall short of the moment, obviously. So like, long-term change takes a lot of time. Like I don't know how any other way to say this. Okay, let me catch up what you've been saying, since my chat's over there and I've been talking to the camera. Of course, don't support Force the Vote because you're scared of change. I'm no, okay. When have you seen? Right. That's why I'll never be a leader, because you're scared to fight. Yes. Hey, we'll wait 20 years because I don't know who's actually trying to stifle the progressive movement. I fought you trying to stop the progressive movement. We call you people neo-progressives. Yes. So again, you're just drawing distinctive lines. This is what I mean. You're just drawing distinctive lines. Because you're trying to identify yourself as the real progressive. It's fine. I don't give a shit. Do what makes you feel better. But I don't care about real progressives. I don't care about any of this, like, I'm a real progressive, you're not a real progressive, I'm a socialist, you're not a real socialist. I don't give a shit about any of this. All this is infighting. All this is just there to make you feel better. That's all any of this really is. None of this has anything to do with organizing, or any of the stuff that the left actually like needs to be doing. Fake progressives trying to make an argument to never do anything. Nope, I'm a progressive arguing that you should do things when they're going to succeed and when you have a reasonable expectation of them succeeding. Do you think that Force the Vote would have brought you a positive outcome to a Medicare for all vote? What did you think was going to happen? Honest to God. What did you think was going to happen if they did Force the Vote? Honestly, tell me. What should they have fought for? Because we already know that the progressives in the House were already angling for committee seats and for rules changes. until the, you know, floor Medicare for all floor vote came up. So what should have happened? Give me your version of what you think would have happened. Yeah, no shit. Because then the conversation shifted towards a Medicare for all floor vote. I know nothing happened. Also, like, do you notice that you're always saying, do you ever notice that, like, every time you characterize my argument, you are saying that you are arguing that I am saying we should never do anything? You do realize that, right? Like, that's not what I've said at all. Never have I said don't do anything. I've said be smarter and go for better wins. But like, no, like I have not said don't ever fight. I also said that as representatives in Congress, fighting looks different from their end. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, just wait. Yeah. Did I ever say wait? It's funny, you say that I say wait, but I've never said wait. I've said that it takes time, it takes organizing. Again, you're drawing a distinction between us two. That's all you're doing. You're just identifying yourself as the real, moral arbiter of leftism, and you're not. I'm sorry to let you know, you're not. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Jesus. Yeah, grassroots takes a long time. Do you not know how long it takes to actually organize grassroots movements? Do you think any of this stuff just pops out of the ether? Like, is that what you think? You think like Justice Democrats, you think what's the other one? Act Blue. You think any of these organizations were around 10 years ago? I don't know how old you are, but I was around for 2012. Trust me, nobody knew who Bernie Sanders was 10 years ago. Within 10 years, we are close to having a president who is like socialist adjacent. Like, he's only now 10 years after the beginning of the second Obama administration. Only now are we getting a former presidential candidate releasing a book before a possible third presidential run that is explicitly antagonistic to capitalism. By the time 20 years is up from 2012, by the time we're looking at 2032, then we're going to be talking about like, oh yeah, we're going to be close to a Medicare for all like bill actually passing. But that's like 7 years down the road. That's like actually no, that's more like 9 years down the road or so. So like, you know, in 2032. So like, let me give you a clue. Grassroots movement failed because they stopped fighting and cared more about keeping power. Do you understand? You do know politics is about power, correct? You do understand that, right? It's fine. It's fine. You can call me a neo-progressive. It's fine. I don't care. I'm moving on. This is going nowhere. This is only you. This is all this is you coming on here and being and doing the I'm a real progressive rain dance. It's fine. I don't give a shit. I'm moving the fuck on. This is going nowhere. We're going in circles. Anyway, you know the thing that they tell, you know, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.